Chapter 586. He Jiaxi's face was full of confidence, but Jing Yunjiao sneered. I've already told you that I'm a doctor, but you never believed me. But it doesn't matter, you'll soon believe me. If you don't come and beg me within a week, then I, Jing Yunjiao, will change my surname to yours, Jing Yunjiao said. She looked inside the ward through the glass. James was lying in the room with an unspeakably ugly expression. Xiao Haiqing's back was facing her, so she couldn't see her expression. The building materials of this ward were special compared to other places. The glass was bulletproof, and once the door was closed, she couldn't hear anything inside, even with her excellent hearing. I beg you. You're crazy. He Jiaxi snorted. She said she was a doctor. Then she said she was an immortal. But was that possible? She knew that Tang Zihua's health was indeed not good, but the Tang family had a specialized medical team, so there was no need to find a mediocre doctor outside. Even if there was a need to find one, there were plenty of famous doctors. Why did it have to be Jing Yunjiao? In the end, it was Jing Yunjiao who deliberately seduced Tang Zihua. If it wasn't for her, Tang Zihua wouldn't have spoken so coldly to her, and the Tang family wouldn't have barred her from entering. She would still be the most likely person to become the Tang family's granddaughter-in-law, and she would still be the daughter that her father paid the most attention to. She wouldn't be an abandoned child. And James doted on her a lot. To put it bluntly, he was her godfather, but in reality, he was just her bedmate. She even had to think about James in all aspects. This kind of identity made her feel humiliated. And the person in front of her was the source of all her tragedies. Jing Yunjiao looked at her coldly, revealing a mocking smile. She didn't have any other strong points, but her medical skills were good. The more she learned, the more she understood the medicinal herbs and acupuncture points. Coupled with the ancestors' golden needle secret technique, it was enough to make He Jiaxi feel pain all over her body without being able to find the cause. Seeing Jing Yunjiao's cold and confident eyes, He Jiaxi felt a little flustered, afraid that Jing Yunjiao would really do something to her. However, when he thought of Xiao Haiqing, he relaxed again. At this moment, James glared at Xiao Haiqing and said angrily, I want the wine recipe. Xiao Haiqing, I won't pursue the matter of the injury you've caused to my leg, but you have to get me all the recipes for Jade Spirit wines. Mr. James, do you think your threat will work on me? I did hurt your leg, but don't forget what you did last night. Xiao Haiqing said expressionlessly. In the words of your Hua nation, you won't shed a tear until you see the coffin. I know you smashed my camera, but there are hidden camera positions everywhere in the house. Even if I let you go find them, you won't be able to clean them up. If you don't want to, then don't blame me for releasing your nude photos. I know that the people in your country are very particular about reputation. James continued. His leg was already broken. If he let Xiao Haiqing die, other than venting his anger, there was no other use. He was a businessman. No matter what, he had to protect his greatest interests. Jade Spirit Wine's recipe was definitely a priceless treasure. He must get it. Xiao Haiqing clenched her fists, a trace of killing intent flashed through her eyes. There was actually more than one camera. Although she was drunk at that time, she still tried her best to find it, but she didn't find it. No wonder he was so fearless. Chapter 587. Xiao Haiqing's eyes flickered. I have to take a look first. Who knows if you're lying to me? Okay, no problem. I've already asked someone to print some of them and send them over. You can definitely admire them. James took out a folder from the drawer and handed it over. Xiao Haiqing took out the things inside and looked at them with a cold expression. These photos were very clear, from when she entered the villa to when she was pinned down by James and exposed to the world. Even if she knew that she had not reached the last step, no one would believe that she was clean just by looking at the photos. Moreover, the other party was very smart. Every photo was taken from the best angle. Some of them looked like she was smiling and accepting them. It was enough to ruin her life. How about it? Are you willing to make a deal with me now? James asked again. Xiao Haiqing threw the things on his bed. I'll think about it. I advise you not to take too long. My patience is limited. If you piss me off, I'll immediately post your photos on the major networks. Then you'll be completely finished. James immediately said. Xiao Haiqing looked at the folder with a complicated expression. Her smile was bleak and determined. Mr. James, don't you even have this little bit of patience? Xiao Haiqing asked. Patience? James glared at Xiao Haiqing angrily. He was a man with crippled legs. Where did his patience come from for this woman? By the way, Mr. James, I'm really sorry for breaking your legs. To make up for it, how about I give you a gift? Xiao Haiqing suddenly smiled. James gritted his teeth. Don't try to play tricks. Why would I? I'm very sincere. I know that you came to me only because of my relationship with Jing Yunjiao and my father's too cowardly. To be honest, I already told my father that if he forced me, I would definitely kill you, but he didn't believe me. Rather than saying that this situation was caused by me, it's better to say that it was him, Xiao Haiqing said calmly. I don't understand what you mean. You don't need to understand. Xiao Haiqing sneered. If I do as you say, then you'll accept my gift, right? Since it's a deal, then it should be fair, right? Both of us suffered losses before. If we're on the same boat, then we should have a common enemy, right? James was stunned. He did not understand Xiao Haiqing's words. But after thinking about it, he could roughly understand part of it. As long as you do as I say, we can turn from enemies to friend. James said again. When he got what he wanted, he would torture this despicable father and his daughter. Xiao Haiqing smiled knowingly. Then you wait. Who knows, you might really get some good news from me. After she finished speaking, she turned and left. When Xiao Daoan saw the door open, he immediately rushed over. Haiqing, how was it? We had a good chat. My dear Mr. James, don't you think so? Xiao Haiqing's eyes were bright, and she smiled. Jing Yunjiao felt that her smile was a little evil. James' face stiffened, and he said, I'm a magnanimous person. I won't pursue the evil deeds of you and your daughter for the time being. Xiao Daoan heaved a sigh of relief. He was so worried. But when he looked at Xiao Haiqing, he was a little surprised. He brought his daughter over just to test the waters. After all, the other party had broken 2 legs. That was a huge matter for a lifetime. How could anyone forgive that easily? Moreover, his daughter had a bad temper. Chapter 588. Xiao Daoan relaxed a little. He felt that he knew his daughter too little in the past. Now, it seemed that his daughter was so obedient because she was interested in James. Otherwise, how could she be mistaken? Mr. James, thank you so much. How about this? I'll pay for the treatment. I'll find a way to contact the best doctor for you. You'll definitely be cured, Xiao Daoan said again. James cursed in his heart. This Xiao Daoan's money was cheated from him. At this time, Jing Yunjiao was a little surprised. After thinking about it, he didn't suspect Xiao Haiqing. The only reason James was willing to be on good terms with the Xiao family was because of benefits, and there were only 2 benefits he could get from Xiao Haiqing. It was the Yuling Wine Industries wine recipe or her. However, although the things they were talking about should be related to her, she believed that Xiao Haiqing wouldn't really scheme against her. It was useless to ask now. At this moment, Xiao Daoan's biggest worry was settled. Xiao Daoan looked at his daughter a little more pleasing to the eye. After coming out of the hospital, he directly brought the 2 of them to an expensive Western restaurant and ordered a table full of delicious food. Xiao Haiqing still went along with him, as if she had let go of yesterday's matter. It was as if she was a different person. Haiqing, you really didn't disappoint Dad. Here's a toast to you, Xiao Daoan said with a smile. Xiao Haiqing clinked glasses with him. She stared at Jiang Rong and said to Jing Yunjiao, Yunjiao, look at my auntie Jiang. She's really beautiful, gentle, virtuous, and has a standard Asian face. Even Mr. James couldn't help but praise her a little more. Jing Yunjiao also smiled. It's not just Mr. James. Previously, CEO Bai told me that the woman behind Uncle Xiao is really a pity. She's so beautiful and young. Even if she finds a big shot in a corporation, she's more than enough. The 2 of them had been together for so long. Even if they didn't have telepathy, they understood each other. Some words didn't need to be understood to know what the other party meant. Xiao Haiqing was a vengeful person. When faced with someone who hated her to the extreme, she would not praise them for no reason. Since she wanted to praise them, then she would help her. She would just add fuel to the fire. It was just a little effort of talking. Xiao Haiqing's compliments were very considerate, while Jing Yunjiao praised one and belittled another. If it was Xiao Haiqing, Xiao Daoan could still reprimand her, but he couldn't say anything about Jing Yunjiao. Has CEO Bai mentioned our Rong before? Xiao Daoan asked casually, feeling awkward. That's right. Although we call her Auntie Jiang isn't that old, right? She's much younger than Mr. Bai. If Auntie Jiang wasn't married, I think Mr. Bai would have made a move on her. Jing Yunjiao said with certainty. Xiao Daoan turned to look at his wife. She was indeed very young. Although she had given birth to a child, her waist was still very slender, and not a single wrinkle could be seen on her face. Compared to those gorgeously dressed women these days, she looked like a white mist, so gentle that it made people feel comfortable. Jiang Rong panicked. How could these two people praise her for no reason? Aya, hubby, do you really believe what they said? I'm already an old woman. People like CEO Bai and Mr. James have many women around them. They have high standards. My appearance is nothing at all. Jiang Rong quickly said. Auntie Jiang, you're belittling yourself. Women like you are the most considerate. Chapter 589. Xiao Haiqing pursed her lips and smiled. Her smile dimmed, and her expression was complicated. Auntie Jiang, it was my fault for targeting you in the past. But at that time, I also thought that you were too beautiful. I was afraid that my father would forget about my mother, so I purposely went against you. Jiang Rong was a little anxious. She didn't know what to say about Xiao Haiqing. Dad, you have good taste. Fortunately, I got together with Auntie Jiang early on. Otherwise, I'm afraid my brother wouldn't exist now, Xiao Haiqing said to herself, then leaned back and started cutting the steak in front of her. Jing Yunjiao also smiled. Uncle Xiao is so lucky. Xiao Daoan was a male chauvinist and had some prejudice against women. For example, towards Xiao Haiqing, he had always felt that since she was a girl, she should act like a girl. She should be obedient, sensible, and virtuous. It would be best if she could be like those women in ancient times, obedient and virtuous. His attitude towards his wife wasn't much better. Xiao Haiqing's mother had always been a housewife after she passed away. Xiao Daoan worked outside and had to enjoy the warmth of his wife and daughter when he returned home. Ever since Jiang Rong married him, she had also stayed at home wholeheartedly. Thinking back to the first time she went to the Xiao family, Xiao Daoan was like an emperor, never helping with the housework. He seemed gentle to his own woman, but in reality, he was controlling. Now that she and Xiao Haiqing suddenly praised Jiang Rong, although it made him proud, at the same time, it also made him feel that she didn't follow the rules of a wife. Sure enough, Xiao Daoan looked at Jiang Rong and couldn't help but frown. You've already given birth, so why are you still wearing such a bright dress? It doesn't suit you. Go back and change the color, Xiao Daoan said. Jiang Rong's face stiffened. Her dress was bright. It was just light green. It couldn't be any simpler. Okay, Jiang Rong quickly agreed. She understood her husband. She could only go along with his wishes. If she talked back to him, it would make him even more unhappy. Oh right, Haiqing, go to the hospital more often these days. James needs someone to take care of him at this time, Xiao Daoan said. Xiao Haiqing's lips curled into a mocking smile. No problem, Dad. After the four finished their meal, they went their separate ways. Jing Yunjiao and Xiao Haiqing stayed in the hotel, and the environment wasn't bad. Yunjiao, your wine recipe. After closing the door, Xiao Haiqing thought, then said, can you brew a similar wine? James's request. Jing Yunjiao asked. That's right, but I don't want him to take advantage of me. That's why I want to ask you if you can change the wine recipe and make a wine that tastes similar but has different effects, Xiao Haiqing replied. And, she didn't tell him that. If it was something important enough to threaten her, the other party would definitely hide it well. In this aspect, it was impossible for Jing Yunjiao to help her. And if Jing Yunjiao knew that the other party had a fake wine recipe in their hands, for her sake, there was a high possibility that she would take out the real one to exchange. After all, a fake wine recipe would eventually be exposed. But she didn't want the money, even if it was enough to ruin her life. She didn't think too much about her reputation in the future. With her father around, reputation was something that could be discarded at any time. What she wanted now was for the people who harmed her to never be able to recover. But the premise was that Jing Yunjiao could come up with something to replace the real wine recipe. You mean a similar wine recipe that can cause discomfort after drinking it? Jing Yunjiao asked, raising his eyebrows. That's right. Xiao Haiqing was very direct. Chapter 590. Jing Yunjiao slightly frowned. If she was James, she would definitely choose to buy the Ocean Food Company after getting the wine recipe and produce the wine with all her strength. Then she would lower the price to compete with Jade Spirit wines. Using a fake wine recipe would definitely cause them to lose miserably, but the problem was that it would definitely cause a huge impact. In other words, there would need to be a lot of consumers who would feel uncomfortable in order to be taken seriously. However, this also meant that this wine recipe would harm innocent people. Using the people to achieve her goal was not a good method and went against her principles. Xiao Haiqing bitterly smiled. Yunjiao is a bit unscrupulous, right? But this method is the best. If he wants the wine recipe, then we'll give it to him. Otherwise, if today James has crooked thoughts, tomorrow there will be others who will use the same method to obtain benefits from you. Rather than that, it's better to eliminate all future troubles. As long as the plan succeeds, from now on, even if you put the wine recipe in front of others, they might not dare to use it. Of course, the premise is that the fake wine recipe has enough similarities. It's best if they can't find the difference. If it was someone else, she wouldn't think that they would be able to research something that was exactly the same but with different effects. But if this person was Jing Yunjiao, she believed it. Although she hadn't seen her medical skills, she knew that Tang Zihua was cured by her. She also knew that there were many people in Serene City who were her patients. Moreover, she sat at the same table as her. Every day, she saw her writing and drawing on a piece of paper, all of which were all kinds of herbs. Sometimes, she would even tell her what kind of effect the combination of several herbs would have. So she could definitely do it. Jing Yunjiao looked at Xiao Haiqing and thought for a moment before saying, I can make an identical one. The taste is similar to the real wine recipe, but after drinking it, the body will feel hot and uncomfortable. But it won't affect the body's health. If you must use this method, you can use the east wind and add fuel to the fire. There's no need to really cause a big impact on innocent people. It was just that his body felt hot and uncomfortable, unlike the wine from Jade Spirit Wine Company, which was good for the body. As for the content of the wine recipe, it was actually very different. The whole order was messed up, and several herbs with similar medicinal properties were replaced. More importantly, the fake wine recipe didn't use the 100-year-old ginseng produced in the space, and the taste of the fake wine recipe couldn't be detected unless it was a person with a very sensitive taste. As for the instrument test, although the order of the herbs was wrong, the types of herbs were basically the same, so there was no need to worry. That's great. It's easy to find extras, Xiao Haiqing said. But Haiqing, you praised Jiang Rong out of the blue today. It can't be that you just wanted your father to scold her, right? Why are you wasting your breath? Jing Yunjiao asked again. Although Xiao Daoan had reprimanded Jiang Rong today, it wouldn't be long before he wouldn't hold it against Jiang Rong anymore. He couldn't possibly suspect her every day just because she looked pretty good, right? Therefore, she felt that if there were no follow-up measures, the words at the dining table would be useless. Xiao Haiqing's eyes flashed with killing intent. That's right, I have other ideas. Yunjiao, it's true that my father is a selfish person, but the only person who could make him realize his own ambitions so quickly and use everything around him is Jiang Rong. If it wasn't for her sowing discord every day, I wouldn't have become a commodity in my father's eyes so quickly. She's smart in her calculations, But the person who catches the eagle will be pecked in the eye by the eagle one day. Chapter 591. As Xiao Haiqing spoke, her smile was cold and elegant. If it wasn't for the fact that she looked a little immature, she could almost match the appearance of Xiao Haiqing in her memory from her previous life. Xiao Haiqing was currently filled with resentment. Jing Yunjiao knew that it would be impossible to clean it up in a short period of time. As for what she wanted to do, even if it wasn't virtuous enough, Jing Yunjiao didn't want to care too much. She immediately took a pen and paper and wrote down the fake wine recipe. Jing Yunjiao's original handwriting was relatively clean, neutralizing the masculinity and gentleness. In order to avoid James' suspicion, she thought about it and wrote it boldly, making it look like it was written by an old man. Then, she found a very delicate box and put the wine recipe in. She looked very serious. However, Xiao Haiqing didn't hand it over for a few days. She only agreed to James's request the next day. The two returned to the county. Xiao Haiqing stayed close to Jing Yunjiao for a few days. She pretended to be very good. At night, she even stayed in the house where Jing Yunjiao and Suchu lived together, creating an opportunity for the origin of the wine recipe. However, seeing Xiao Haiqing and Jing Yunjiao acting so mysteriously, Suchu was confused. She was supposed to stay at home during the holidays, but when she thought of Jing Yunjiao's alienation, Suchu and Gan Jinchen moved back. These days, they took the initiative to talk to her every day. They seemed to be more clingy than Xiao Haiqing. "Cousin, look, this is the dish I made. Try it and see how it tastes. Cousin, do you want to accompany me to buy clothes? Cousin, Grandpa asked me to bring you some food." For the whole day, Jing Yunjiao would hear Suchu's voice buzzing in her ears almost every hour. Not only that, other than her, Gan Jinchen also became a little strange. After a while, he would open his mouth and ask her some medical questions. It seemed like he was very eager to learn. However, it was obvious that he wanted to chat with her and amuse her. Finally, 3 days later, after Xiao Haiqing left, Jing Yunjiao couldn't hold it in any longer. "Chu, what's wrong with you two these days? You've been knocking on the door nearly 20 times a day. Is something wrong?" Jing Yunjiao asked. A trace of guilt flashed across Suchu's face. 20 times? Is there so much? Hihi, cousin, I'm just bored. If you two continue to be like this, I'm going to move out, Jing Yunjiao said with a faint smile. No. When Suchu heard that, she quickly said, "You can't move out. Cousin, I'm sorry. I know we've disturbed you, but you and Haiqing have been so secretive lately. You don't usually take the initiative to talk to us." The corner of Jing Yunjiao's mouth twitched. On the day of Xiao Haiqing's accident, she was in an extremely bad mood. She felt that she had implicated the people around her, so she wanted to keep a distance from Suchu and the others. That was why she purposely avoided them the next day. However, she only wanted to remind them not to go out together as much as possible. She didn't want to completely cut ties with them. If she didn't take the initiative to talk to them, the problem was that the two of them would come looking for her every once in a while. Why would she need to take the initiative to talk to them? "I wanted to talk to you about something these few days, but I felt that you two were a little strange, so I wanted to see what was going on with you two," Jing Yunjiao said helplessly. When Suchu heard that, a trace of panic flashed across her face. "Cousin, don't tell me you want to keep a distance from us." Suchu thought for a moment, took a deep breath, and asked. Chapter 592. Jing Yunjiao stared blankly. He discovered that Suchu looked very nervous. Her pair of eyes revealed a trace of mist, and the corner of her mouth slightly trembled. It seemed that as long as she opened her mouth to say yes, she would cry the next second. Suchu stood at the door with an uneasy expression. Jing Yunjiao suddenly felt a little guilty. "Yes, but also no," Jing Yunjiao said. "I'm not prepared to keep a distance from you in the future. I just want to avoid attracting people's attention as much as possible at a specific time. After all, I'm not the same as you. Chu, you should also understand why there is always trouble surrounding me. It's because I'm an orphan. It's because my childhood was miserable. It's because I deserve to live worse than everyone else. Some people were like this. No matter how good the life of those who were born more honorable than them was, in their eyes, it was only right and proper. But they could tolerate those who started higher than them stepping on top of their heads, but they absolutely could not tolerate a person who had always been in a low and inferior position suddenly soaring to the sky. From her miserable birth, many people could feel God's tolerance. It would make them feel that they were not the most pitiful one. Some people enjoyed this kind of overflowing sympathy. But once one day the other party found out that she broke free from that sympathy, and even did better than everyone else, they would get envy, but disgust would also follow. Since her rebirth, the reason why there were so many troubles was not that she attracted black, but that her experience was easy to bully. In contrast, in her previous life, the only people who looked for trouble with her from beginning to end were Xiao Hongye and her friends. Other people, no matter how vicious their appearance was, would feel balanced in their hearts when they looked at her. At most, they would make a few jokes, and would not target her closely. But cousin, you should also ask me and cousin's opinion, right? Ask us whether or not we care about your body's troublesome constitution. Suchu rubbed her nose, feeling wronged. I can't lock myself in the dark room forever just because I'm afraid of unknown dangers or troubles, can I? You're worried about bringing danger to your friends, so you don't want to make friends. This is the stupidest solution. Cousin and I have already thought about it. We can improve together with you. Hai Qing always says that I'm stupid, so I'll learn how to read people's expressions. If you think that we don't have the ability to protect ourselves, then we can be like Hai Qing and learn martial arts. With an expert like you by our side, even if we're as dumb as a block of wood, we'll still be able to learn a lot more than others, right? Suchu had a lot of principles. However, it had to be said that it was extremely convincing. Jing Yunjiao hoped that he would live an exciting and fulfilling life. He wanted to have a future and friends, and not avoid them all the time. Although Suchu and Gan Jinchen were ordinary people, they made her feel like she was surrounded by family more than once. It could be said that they were not just friends. She pursed her lips. Learning martial arts is very tiring. So you agree? Suchu glared at him. Ever since Hai Qing started learning martial arts from me, Keek has been waking up at 5 in the morning. Jing Yunjiao's expression softened as he spoke. Suchu's lips curled up as she rushed over. She was extremely happy. Don't be afraid, don't be afraid. When I was young and lived with my grandfather, I also woke up at 5 in the morning. Actually, I've wanted to learn from you for a long time. Who knows, maybe one day I'll be able to fly over roofs and vault over walls. Don't you think so? Jing Yunjiao's mouth twitched. He was speechless. Flying over roofs and vaulting over walls was not that easy. She could be considered as light as a swallow now, but she was still far from the legendary Qinggong. Moreover, the so-called Qinggong was not that magical. It was just borrowing some external objects and using internal energy to move. It was impossible to fly for no reason. Chapter 593. Suchu's smile was bright and youthful, which was very infectious. Outside, Gan Jinchen was sitting on the sofa, pretending to be serious, but he was actually eavesdropping. Seeing that Suchu had achieved her goal, he smiled faintly and went to wash some fruits, brought them over, put them down silently, and turned to leave. Yunjiao, let's start the special training tomorrow. I'll wait for you at the door at 5 o'clock in the morning. Suchu winked at Jing Yunjiao and smiled slyly. Jing Yunjiao was also amused by Gan Jinchen's act of acting cool. At this moment, Xiao Haiqing had left for Serene City and was in James's ward. Did you bring the things? James frowned. After seeing Xiao Haiqing, his mood changed obviously. There was another person standing next to James. Xiao Haiqing had never seen him in person, but she had seen his photo. However, even if she hadn't investigated him, she could tell from his expectant gaze that he wasn't unfamiliar with her, that this person should be Zhuo Haiyang, the owner of the Ocean Food Company, who had provided her with a place to stay. He was also the direct beneficiary of this matter. Xiao Hai glanced at him and the corner of his mouth curled up. This must be Mr. Zhuo. You are indeed a successful person, just a little different. After the accident, Jing Yunjiao had investigated this person. He had also read the information. Zhuo Haiyang was only 27 or 28 years old this year and became the owner of the company after inheriting his family business. In the past, his company was mainly in the wine business, but the market was not good. His wine was not special enough, and there was no brand effect. He couldn't afford to spend a lot of money to promote it, so the business was getting worse and worse. In the end, he simply changed the business and developed some new products. Although the food was not very popular, it was not bad. The other party was stunned and then smiled. Miss Xiao. I accompanied Mr. James to Mr. Zhuo's house before and found that your house was quite clean and warm, but a little lonely. Mr. Zhuo, don't you have a wife and children? Xiao Haiqing asked again. His eyes seemed to be bursting with flames, almost swallowing his rationality. However, every second of every day, she would remind herself that she had to be calm and sober in order to live a better life. Only then could she prevent those who bullied her from achieving their goals. I'm not married yet, so, my parents used to live at home, but they've moved abroad, Zhuo Haiyang replied. He was a little surprised and even a little confused. Logically speaking, this Xiao Haiqing should be very agitated and hateful to see him, but her expression was calm, and even her tone was very intimate, as if they were old friends who had not seen each other for many years. This attitude was simply too strange. If she was an adult or someone with some experience, he would definitely be more cautious. After all, a person would not show an amiable attitude for no reason. However, she was just a girl. Perhaps she had been captured by Mr. James and was grateful to him. Zhuo Haiyang was relaxed, and there was a smile on his face. Xiao Haiqing sneered in her heart. However, Mr. James did not like her change of topic very much. He frowned and said, I don't object if you want to chat, but now I just want to know if you've brought what we want. Miss Xiao, I don't want everything you've done before to delay time. I've got the wine recipe, but I don't want to give it to you yet. Xiao Haiqing smiled and said, those photos are still in your hands, aren't they? Besides, Mr. James, I said I would give you a gift, but you haven't signed for it yet. Chapter 594. Xiao Haiqing's eyes flickered with a ripple of light, seeming to be a bit arrogant and confident, which made James and Zhuo Haiyang stunned. Gift? Zhuo Haiyang was a bit puzzled. He didn't believe that this Xiao Haiqing would send anything good. After all, even if it was the wine recipe, it was the two of them who forced her to get it. Unless she was a fool, otherwise, how could she take the initiative to let them take advantage of her? James frowned even more, his face full of annoyance. If it wasn't for the wine recipe, he would definitely teach this girl a good lesson. At this time, she was still thinking of stalling for time and even deceiving him. How hateful. It seems that the two of you don't have much patience. Xiao Haiqing chuckled. The wine recipe is in my hands now. If you want it, then you have to promise me two conditions. One is to return the photos to me, and the other is to accept my gift. If you don't want to, then forget it. It's just publishing the photos. So what if you ruin my reputation? No one will benefit in the end anyway. James gritted his teeth. What gift are you talking about? Xiao Haiqing heard and smiled. Mr. Zhuo's house is really a good place. Tonight, I will send the things over on time. At that time, I hope the two of you can prepare the things I want. Xiao Haiqing finished speaking and turned to leave. She knew in her heart that the other party could copy countless copies of those photos. Even if they really took out a copy, it would be of no use to her at all. Therefore, since she knew that she was going to lose miserably, she had to drag someone down with her. As soon as Xiao Haiqing left, the two men in the ward were confused and somewhat angry in their hearts. It was only a few hours' time. It wasn't that they couldn't wait. Zhuo Haiyang even prepared a wheelchair to bring James back to the villa. However, in order to prevent Xiao Haiqing from playing tricks, he specially hired 6 bodyguards to follow them. Only then did he feel relieved. How was the chat with Mr. James? As soon as Xiao Haiqing returned to the car, Xiao Dawan asked excitedly. Xiao Haiqing looked very obedient, very good, but James asked me to go to Mr. Zhuo's apartment tonight. Dad, do you think I should go? Go. Of course I'm going. Xiao Daoan did not consider in the slightest and directly gave an affirmative answer. After he finished speaking, he seemed to be worried that Xiao Haiqing would think too much and hurriedly explained, Haiqing, Dad knows that he has wronged you, but what's done is done. I have no choice but to accept my fate. Otherwise, how am I going to answer to your mother? And Mr. James's legs can't recover now, so he can't do anything. I guess you went over to chat with him and drink tea just now. I think so too. But Dad, can you ask Auntie Jiang to send me over tonight? I have something to say to Auntie Jiang, Xiao Haiqing said again. The air in the car was stuffy and suffocating. Sitting in the front passenger seat, Jiang Rong had a bad premonition and was very irritated. These days, Xiao Haiqing was too polite to her. She was too polite. Now, she invited her out for no reason. She must be up to no good. Haiqing, Auntie has to take care of Junjun at night. Jiang Rong immediately refused. Xiao Haiqing's eyes flashed with a trace of sadness. Auntie Jiang, didn't you say before that I'm no different from your child? Last time, I was frightened in Mr. Zhuo's apartment, and there's a shadow in my heart. That's why I wanted you to accompany me. After all, if Dad went, he would definitely feel uncomfortable. But I didn't expect you to be unwilling. Okay, then forget it. Everything about Junjun is very important. What am I? To think that I was so fucking considerate of this family. In the end, you won't even agree to such a small thing. Then I won't go either. Chapter 595. In the blink of an eye, Xiao Haiqing seemed to have turned into a sentimental child. After saying those words, her eyes rippled, and a few drops of tears actually flowed out. The sound of sobbing could be heard, and Xiao Daoan was shocked. He turned around and saw that Xiao Haiqing's face was covered in tears. The 2 lines of tear stains were particularly eye-catching, and she looked like a child who had suffered countless grievances. It made his heart ache. Ah Rong. Xiao Daoan frowned. Stay with Haiqing. She's been in a bad mood recently, and she needs a sensible woman to teach her. Haiqing was a girl, after all. She definitely couldn't tell her father about her private matters. Moreover, last time in Zhuo Haiyang's house, his daughter became James's woman in the blink of an eye. She was still so young, and such a sudden change must have been hard for her to accept or get used to. That was why her personality changed so quickly during this period. Her mother was no longer around, and the person who helped her soothe her heart naturally had to be replaced by Jiang Rong. Hubby. But Junjun. Jiang Rong panicked. Isn't there still Sister Wang at home? We've given her so much money, could it be that she doesn't even know how to take care of a child? After Xiao Daoan finished speaking, he glanced at the clothes she was wearing. Dress decently. You're wrapped up like a dumpling. Just looking at you can suffocate me to death. Jiang Rong's heart suddenly felt uncomfortable. On such a hot day, she wore long sleeves and trousers, and the color was more dignified and dark. However, this wasn't the style she liked. It was because her husband had complained that the colors she wore were too bright. She was afraid that he would think that she was seducing people, so she specially dressed like an old woman. She didn't expect to be reprimanded again. Yes, Auntie Jiang, your taste in clothes seems to have deteriorated recently. When you were waiting for me downstairs, a nurse even asked me if it was you. It didn't feel like you, as if you were a little older. You don't match my father well, Xiao Haiqing said with red eyes. Her father was also very fickle. After all, after praising Jiang Rong before, he didn't say anything about her clothes anymore. Her father couldn't possibly continue to disagree with Jiang Rong's taste in clothes because of her groundless words. Xiao Daoan cared about his face. After hearing Xiao Haiqing's words, he simply took his wife to a branded clothing store to shop. When they came out, there were a few bags in the car, and even Xiao Haiqing had a share. When she returned home, she saw that Xiao Haiqing's eyelashes were still wet. She said helplessly, "Child, when did you become such a crybaby? When you go to Mr. James' place, you can't be like this." Xiao Haiqing nodded. What of her? She of course. The child, the other of a child. She. That, Jiang. Chapter 596. If it was in the past, seeing Jiang Rong so haggard, Xiao Daoan would definitely let her do whatever she wanted. No matter what Xiao Haiqing said, it would be useless. But it was different this time. Xiao Haiqing was dressed especially beautifully. Wearing the new clothes Xiao Daoan bought for her, it was as if she was going to attend an extremely grand ball. Although her figure wasn't hot enough, it wasn't bad either. The temptation index was extremely high. She stood at the door of Jiang Rong's bedroom and looked at the couple. If Auntie doesn't go, I won't go either. Dad, I'm scared. Why don't Dad go with you? Xiao Daoan was a little irritated. He suddenly felt that his daughter seemed a little too weak. She wasn't like this in the past. But no matter how good Dad is, he can't replace Mom's role. Auntie Jiang is different. When I get married in the future, Auntie can give me advice. I'm still thinking of asking her for advice on how to get along with others. After all, Dad, you know that I have a bad temper. I'm afraid I'll accidentally offend Mr. James again. Xiao Haiqing was very patient. It was as if the clothes had eaten a heavy weight and made up their minds. Xiao Daoan was more and more troubled. But he had to admit that if Jiang Rong could give his daughter pointers on the way, he would be much more at ease. He lowered his head and looked at Jiang Rong. Did you eat something bad? Can you hold on for a while? Jiang Rong was troubled. How about this? Find a driver to drive me there and then send Auntie Jiang to the hospital for a checkup. I guarantee that it won't be long before Auntie Jiang is full of energy again, Xiao Haiqing suggested. Before Jiang Rong could say anything, Xiao Daoan nodded. Then let's do that. Jiang Rong was so angry that her face turned red. She did want to refuse, but once she strongly expressed her unwillingness, Xiao Daoan would definitely blame her. Even if Xiao Haiqing really didn't go or caused trouble at James's place, then he could turn around and blame it on her. She was about to vomit to death in her heart. She stared at Xiao Haiqing, wishing she could swallow her into her stomach to vent her resentment. But on the surface, Jiang Rong still had to pretend to be a good stepmother. She got into the car with a gentle and doting expression. Xiao Haiqing smiled and followed closely behind. There was a faint fragrance in the car. Xiao Haiqing was humming along the way, fiddling with a small box in her hand. She was very satisfied. This made Jiang Rong feel even weirder. In the end, she could not help but ask, Haiqing, what are you holding in your hand? Why does it smell so good? This. Xiao Haiqing smiled. Yun Zhao gave it to me. Didn't she have the wine recipe? In fact, that wine recipe was left to her by her master, and so is this box of things. It can remove freckles and even smooth out wrinkles on my face. Recently, I have 2 pimples on my face, but they were gone soon after I used it. It's really a treasure. A trace of doubt flashed across Jiang Rong's face. Was there such a powerful thing? Auntie Jiang, have you not been resting well recently? The dark circles under his eyes seemed to be quite serious. Also, the skin around his eyes seemed to be a little loose. Was he too tired? Do you want to try it? Xiao Haiqing asked again. Jiang Rong rubbed her temples, feeling a little absent-minded. Too many things had happened recently. Indeed, she was a little tired. Xiao Haiqing's words flashed across her mind. She only felt light and did not think much about it. She took the small box. Inside the box was a white ointment that smelled very fragrant. Jiang Rong tried to smear some on her face. Even the driver beside her was surprised by her cooperation and obedience. In the past, they were clearly 2 people who were at loggerheads. Now, they were unusually peaceful. It was too strange. Chapter 597. However, although it was a little different from usual, the driver was not stupid enough to deliberately pick a fight. After all, if the 2 of them quarreled in the car, he would be the one to suffer. He would even have to explain to Mr. Xiao several times later. It was simply too troublesome. The car sped along, and the fragrance lingered on the tip of his nose. On the way, Jiang Rong was surprisingly quiet, staring straight ahead. Xiao Haiqing would suddenly say something to her, and every time this happened, Jiang Rong would nod her head in agreement. It was peaceful. When they arrived, the driver glanced at Jiang Rong and said, "Madam, I'll drive you now. Since Auntie Jiang is here, it doesn't seem good if we don't go in and greet her. What's more, Auntie Jiang seems to be well now." Xiao Haiqing interrupted the driver and said, "Auntie Jiang, your stomach doesn't hurt anymore, right?" Jiang Rong nodded in silence. Xiao Haiqing smiled. "How about you go in with me?" "Okay." Jiang Rong pinched her eyebrows and nodded in response. The driver's expression became more and more strange. He felt that Jiang Rong seemed to be a different person. Could it be that Miss had something on her, so she responded to every word she said? But after all, Madam was his employer. He could only listen to whatever she said. When working for others, it was better not to ask too many questions. Otherwise, he would not be able to work long. The driver opened the door for Jiang Rong. After getting out of the car, Xiao Haiqing directly took Jiang Rong's arm and walked into the villa. The driver found a secluded place to stop and waited patiently. He took a few sips of the water that Xiao Haiqing gave him before getting in the car. He exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. As the cool wind blew, he seemed to be much more refreshed than before. At this time, the door was opened. Xiao Haiqing walked in calmly, only to see that all the facilities in the house had not changed. However, as James said before, she couldn't find a single invisible camera in the house. "Why is she here?" Zhuo Haiyang frowned. James was also unhappy. Xiao Haiqing laughed. "I said I would give you a gift. Don't tell me you don't even remember this. The gift you mentioned is her? Miss Xiao, I remember that she is your stepmother, right?" Zhuo Haiyang immediately asked instead of James. "You misunderstood." Xiao Haiqing pursed her lips and glanced at Jiang Rong. "In fact, Auntie Jiang insisted on coming here. She met Mr. James, and she was deeply attracted by your style. But my father was strict and did not allow her to contact with outsiders, so she could only endure her feelings until now." "What do you mean? Don't tell us that she came to Mr. James." "I had no choice because of Auntie Jiang's pleas. She threatened me that if I didn't bring her here, she would kick me out of the Xiao family. So after thinking about it, I still felt that I should give Mr. James a surprise." After that, he even turned to look at Jiang Rong and asked, "What I said just now was correct, right?" Jiang Rong was stunned. Yes, her eyes revealed a little tiredness, but her face was indeed faintly red. Although she was not young, her face was not inferior to that of a young man. She was really tender and charming. Her figure was just right and exquisite. Her clothes revealed a bit of charm. There was also a fragrance on her body, which made people want to smell her carefully. Chapter 598. No lustful man would be able to stop a woman's invitation, especially one like James. He had just experienced the shock of having his leg broken, so he felt a little inferior, afraid that he wouldn't have the ability to attract women in the future. However, at this moment, Jiang Rong appeared, looking very shy as she agreed to Xiao Haiqing's words and liked him. Moreover, he had seen that Xiao Daoan before. He had a standard Asian face, was young, and even looked very charming. However, such a man's wife had fallen in love with someone else. Although it was very likely that Xiao Daoan had sold his wife for glory, he still felt that it wasn't the case. After all, a daughter and a wife were different. Even if a daughter was in the palm of his hand, she would get married sooner or later. However, a wife was a private property. Xiao Daoan could sell his daughter, but he definitely wouldn't tolerate his wife being taken by someone else, because that would violate his dignity as a man. That meant that this Jiang Rong was indeed somewhat sincere. Whether it was because of his money or because of his person. "I've delivered the gift. Take out the photos first. The wine recipe is in the box in my hand," Xiao Haiqing said again. James nodded. Zhuo Haiyang looked at his expression and took out a folder. Inside were some photos and a hard drive. Everything should be inside. Xiao Haiqing glanced at the things inside and pushed the box out. "The things are real. If you don't believe me, you can check it carefully after brewing it yourself." After saying that, Xiao Haiqing stood up. A few bodyguards immediately surrounded her. Xiao Haiqing smiled. "Mr. James, do you want to do the same thing again?" However, if you really do that, I'm afraid it won't be as simple as breaking your leg. Since it's a deal, then it should look like a deal. If you're all lustful, then this beauty that's delivered to your door is enough for you to use. If you have any ideas about me, Xiao Haiqing said as she took out a knife. I know that there are many of you. Even if I have a weapon, I can't do anything. However, if I can't kill you, I can commit suicide. My phone is equipped with a GPS system. My friends will definitely know where I have been and where I have passed by. I'm afraid you won't be able to explain it to the police, Xiao Haiqing said again. When James heard this, he said, "What a lunatic." "Let her go," James continued. Xiao Haiqing snorted. He lifted his feet and walked past Jiang Rong. The corner of his mouth curled up as he reached for her shoulder. He directly used the knife to cut the dress. The beautiful dress instantly fell, revealing her delicate skin. Jiang Rong's face was still red, but she didn't react much. Xiao Haiqing pushed her again, and Jiang Rong immediately knelt in front of James' wheelchair. The angle looked very intimate. Xiao Haiqing smiled with satisfaction. She took out her phone and took a picture. Then, she walked out of the door. She only needed one piece of evidence to destroy Jiang Rong. As for the exact process, it didn't matter. Moreover, there was no need to doubt it at all. James was a pervert. Otherwise, he wouldn't have looked for He Jiasi or her. Although Jiang Rong wasn't young enough, she was still very tempting. She could already tell from his eyes just now. As for the reason why Jiang Rong was so cooperative, Xiao Haiqing held the exquisite little box in her hand. She lowered her head and carefully put it away. Then, she walked over to the driver who was waiting in the corner. Chapter 599. As soon as he saw Xiao Haiqing, the driver hurried to greet her. But when he found that she was alone, he was stunned. He glanced at the villa and asked in surprise, "Miss, where is Mrs. Jiang?" Xiao Haiqing shook her head and said, when Auntie Jiang saw Mr. James's leg injury, she felt extremely guilty. Then, she started chatting with Mr. James. The two of them hit it off at first sight. She said that she wanted to stay for dinner. "Uncle Liu, I'm worried that she will cheat on my father." "No, no." The driver was dumbfounded. "I was suspicious just now because Auntie Jiang was too cooperative with me along the way. She was unwilling to go out, but she agreed to everything I said on the road. Do you remember? I asked her if Mr. James was a very elegant man, and she nodded and said yes. I'm afraid she fell in love with him," Xiao Haiqing said again. The driver swallowed his saliva and was completely confused. Didn't he send Miss here to chat with the foreigner this time? Why did Miss come out so soon after they went in, but Mrs. Jiang, and when he thought about it carefully, Mrs. Jiang was really strain. Just now on the road, when Miss mentioned Mr. James, Mrs. Jiang blushed like a girl in love. At that time, he thought it was because the car was too hot, but now when he thought about it, it was not the case at all. He was the driver of the Xiao family, and he often heard some private topics, such as the relationship between Miss and James. Although he felt that it was a pity for Miss, he couldn't make any decisions about his employer's family. He was only responsible for doing what he should do. Who knew that this family was so messy? As the stepmother, Madam actually fell in love with Mrs. Mann. She even pretended to want to send Miss to the villa and openly snatched her. The driver's mind was in a mess. He only felt that his worldview had been seriously shocked. "Miss, this, what should we do now?" The driver asked nervously. Should he rush in to find someone to prevent things from becoming irreparable, call Mr. Xiao, or pretend that he did not know and let Mrs. Jiang fool around outside? "Uncle Liu, I just wanted to drag Auntie Jiang out by force, but she threatened me. She said that if I disturbed her, she would ask James to kill me in the future. After all, even if I stopped her this time, there would be plenty of opportunities for them to have sex in the future. But if we tell Dad about this kind of thing, he will not only not believe it, but also think that we are talking nonsense. So I think it's better for us to protect ourselves," Xiao Haiqing said. Hearing it, the driver nodded quickly. Wasn't it? Mr. Xiao doted on Mrs. Xiao very much, and he cared about his reputation very much. If they said anything, they would definitely suffer in the future. How to protect ourselves? He immediately asked. In fact, it's very simple. Because even if we go to ask for Mr. Jiang, they will not let us succeed. We can tell Dad that we were going to call the police, but they threatened us with him and did not let us talk nonsense. Xiao Haiqing continued, in fact, it's also true. Just now, Mr. James had already threatened me. If I inform Dad now and ruin Mr. James's good thing, then Dad will definitely go bankrupt. Then it will be really over. Xiao Haiqing talked nonsense for a while and then got into the car. The smell in the car had disappeared completely. The driver sighed and carefully returned to the car. He stared at the door of the villa, and every second felt like a year. Chapter 600. Xiao Haiqing sat in the back and closed her eyes to rest. The villa entrance became even quieter. Half an hour passed, then an hour passed, and Jiang Rong still didn't come out. The driver was certain that Madame must have done something she shouldn't have. But wasn't she a little too bold? She didn't even try to avoid the two of them and even threatened them. Why didn't he see that Madame was such a person before? The driver felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. Xiao Haiqing played with the ointment that Jing Yunjiao had given her. She was extremely calm. According to Jing Yunjiao, the ointment's fragrance could make people lose their consciousness. The more they smelled it, the worse it would be. However, the effects of the ointment could be easily neutralized. Drinking water with the ointment powder would do the trick, or washing one's face while smelling the ointment could keep one awake. Before getting into the car, she used an excuse to ask the driver to drink some ointment to neutralize the effects of the ointment. Along the way, she kept probing. Halfway through the journey, Jiang Rong was already in a daze. She couldn't think clearly and became a little dazed. However, the effects of the ointment were passive and only made Jiang Rong more obedient. Xiao Haiqing held the ointment in her hands. She couldn't believe that there would be a day when she would be so unscrupulous. But sometimes, when dealing with evil people, she could only give them a taste of their own medicine. She wouldn't tolerate Jiang Rong blindly. Inside the villa, Zhuo Haiyang and a group of bodyguards were waiting in the living room. James and Jiang Rong were in the bedroom. The woman was kneeling in front of the wheelchair like an obedient puppy, letting him do whatever he wanted. Although James felt that this woman wasn't passionate at all and was a little dazed, it would be abnormal if he didn't use the woman in his hands. Everyone seemed to be deaf to the noise. Zhuo Haiyang looked at the brocade box on the table with a burning gaze. The recipe for Yu Ling wines. Finally, he got it. His Zhuo family had been in the liquor business for decades, but they had always been suppressed by others in the same industry. The liquor that they had painstakingly brewed wasn't popular in the market. However, Yu Ling wines had only appeared for a little over a year and had already become a well-known brand. How could he be satisfied? He just wanted to see what kind of wine recipe this budding Yu Ling wine company had. Even if he lost most of the company's shares, it didn't matter. With this wine recipe and Mr. James, his company would definitely rise to fame. In her hands, this thing would shine even more brilliantly. Zhuo Haiyang's smile was strange and savage. He even felt as if he had been blessed by the heavens. Time ticked by and Jiang Rong did not come out for the whole night. Xiao Haiqing pursed her lips and smiled like a naughty woman. Just as dawn broke, there was a commotion in the villa. Impossible. How could you do this to me? I want to call the police. You bastards, how dare you, treat me like this? Jiang Rong wailed, her entire being weak and humble. His body was in a terrible state. His knees were red and swollen, and it was obvious that he had knelt for too long. Other than that, there were countless marks on his body, and he was in extreme pain. Slut, you were as obedient as a kitten last night, and now you're pretending to be chaste. You want to get benefits from Mr. James, right? Zhuo Haiyang sneered. Last night, he thought that this woman was obedient. He didn't expect that after one night, she would actually start to show her true colors after successfully climbing into bed. She was like a shrew, truly ugly to the extreme. She naturally recognized that car, as she had accompanied her husband to choose it. His trembling body did not feel any warmth under the sun, and his mind was blank. Xiao Haiqing would definitely not let her off and would definitely spout nonsense in front of Xiao Daoan. At that time, even if she had 10 mouths, she wouldn't be able to explain herself. What should she do? What should they do? Through the car window, Xiao Haiqing saw the panic on Jiang Rong's face and the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. Jiang Rong was scared now, but what about before? When she instigated her father to send her over, why wasn't she afraid at all? She didn't even feel the slightest bit of guilt towards her. After that, she kept whispering into her father's ear. Now, all of this was retribution that she deserved. Chapter 602. Just as Jiang Rong was at a loss, Xiao Haiqing opened the car door and walked over. She had a head of neat short hair, but she had an enchanting handsomeness. In that gown, she didn't look like a tomboy at all. She walked closer step by step, her eyes shining brightly, as if they had the power to corrode everything. Jiang Rong's heart trembled. It must be her. She was here for revenge. Auntie Jiang, I didn't expect you to be so daring. Xiao Haiqing chuckled, but she didn't stop moving. She seemed to be very friendly as she supported Jiang Rong. When Jiang Rong heard this, she immediately pushed Xiao Haiqing out. You bitch. You're the one who harmed me. You're the one who harmed me. Xiao Haiqing, what did I do wrong to you? How could you torture me in such a shameless way? Shameless? Ha ha. Xiao Haiqing chuckled. Auntie Jiang, do you dare to say that I was sent here because of my father? You didn't fan the flames. Her father was a hypocrite. Even if he wanted to send his daughter away, he wouldn't do it so directly. Unless someone kept finding excuses for him to satisfy his pride and let him comfort himself that he had no choice but to do it for the sake of her, the victim. And the person who kept brainwashing him was Jiang Rong, wasn't it? It could even be said that she was using someone else to do the dirty work, right? Compared to her father, she was the one who made it impossible for her to get up. How could she say that she had done wrong to her? She also wanted to ask this question. What did she do to offend Jiang Rong? Since the day she married into the family, she had been targeting her time and time again, causing her to be separated from her father, making her feel as if she didn't have a home, and almost being defiled. Just because she was the daughter of the first wife. Just because her mother met her father before her. Was this her fault? Xiao Haiqing smiled and let out a sigh. Auntie Jiang, it's all in the past. Although I blame you a little, I really didn't do anything last night. I was just asking you politely if you wanted to go in and have a seat. Who knew that you would agree without even thinking about it? You even looked like you couldn't wait. If you don't believe me, you can ask Uncle Liu if that's really the case. I didn't do it willingly. You must have used some kind of method, hypnosis. Are you the one who learned hypnosis? Jiang Rong kept thinking about it in her mind, trying hard to defend herself. Heh. Your imagination is really rich. Why don't you say that I know mind manipulating? Do you think there are so many fantasies in this world? Xiao Haiqing said, almost forcibly helping her into the car. Jiang Rong thought of the clothes she was wearing and didn't dare to go home. Let go of me. I want to go back to my parents' home. Auntie, are you all right? You did something wrong to my father, and you still have the face to go back to your parents' home? Xiao Haiqing snorted, closed the car door, and said, Uncle Liu, drive properly. The two of us have to redeem ourselves, right? Uncle Liu didn't dare to stop after hearing that. They didn't go in to look for her last night. Later, they could tell Xiao Daoan that they were threatened. Then, they couldn't hide it anymore. The car sped, and Jiang Rong began to struggle. However, Xiao Haiqing had learned a lot of moves from Jing Yunjiao. She could beat up James when she was drunk, so how could she not deal with Jiang Rong in front of her? After a short while, Xiao Haiqing had completely restrained Jiang Rong. She could not move an inch and could only watch as Jiang Rong looked at the scenery outside in despair. She was extremely flustered. Chapter 603. Not long after, they arrived at the Xiao family. Xiao Daoan didn't go to the company. When he saw Jiang Rong, he immediately asked, "What's wrong with you? Why didn't you pick up when I called you?" Then, his gaze landed on Jiang Rong's neck that she was trying hard to cover. Instantly, his pupils constricted and he gritted his teeth. What happened? The veins on Xiao Daoan's forehead were exposed. He clenched his fists so tightly that one could see the veins that were about to burst. His attitude was really scary. Jiang Rong's legs went soft, and she fell to the ground. Tears fell instantly. "Hubby, it's all Haiqing's fault. She forced me to go to James' house," Xiao Haiqing sneered. Xiao Daoan's gaze turned over, looking as if he was deeply convinced. "Dad, you know that I'm James' woman, right? Since that's the case, how could I bring my stepmother to James? And the truth isn't like what Auntie Jiang said. Yesterday, on the way, I couldn't help but tell Auntie Jiang about Mr. James. I didn't expect Auntie Jiang to be so excited at that time, even her cheeks were red. When we got off the car, I saw that her body was almost recovered, so I greeted her and asked if she wanted to come in and say hello. I didn't expect her to agree, but who knew that she actually nodded. Also, after we went in, Auntie Jiang went overboard. She tried to curry favor with Mr. James and chased me out. She even. Dad, look." Then, Xiao Haiqing took out her phone and placed the photo she took last night in front of her father. In the photo, Jiang Rong was only wearing seductive underwear, kneeling in front of James' wheelchair. Her expression couldn't be seen clearly, but it could be felt that she was holding James' thigh, her face pressed against it. It was obvious what she was going to do. When Xiao Daoan saw this, even his anger subsided. He almost used all his strength to slap his wife. In an instant, blood flowed out from the corner of Jiang Rong's mouth. "Bitch! Jiang Rong! I really misjudged you. You still dare to say that Haiqing wronged you? How can you be wronged like this?" Xiao Daoan roared angrily. Anger swam in his body, and his head was dizzy. He wanted to strangle the woman in front of him. That James, it was one thing for him to take his daughter. Anyway, his daughter was going to get married sooner or later. But he actually dared to seduce his wife. He only felt that a green light flashed above his head, and he lost all his face. Jiang Rong felt wronged. "Honey, I really didn't do it willingly." This photo was taken by Haiqing. She was in the room at the time, so why didn't she stop him? She was the one who discussed it with James. Xiao Haiqing sighed. "Auntie Jiang, my father treats you so well. I really don't understand why you would betray him and make him angry." Xiao Haiqing said, and then said, "Yesterday, you acted coquettishly to James, and then James threatened me. If I ruined his good deed at that time, he would make my father go completely bankrupt and be unlucky for the rest of his life. Moreover, you said it yourself, if I don't know what's good for me, I'll get my father to kick me out and kill me outside. Then how could I dare? Even if I don't care about myself, I have to think about my father." Xiao Haiqing's voice was soft, and Uncle Liu, who was beside her, shivered inexplicably. He nodded and said, "Yes." In the past, he had seen this family of three quarreling, but it seemed to have been reversed. At that time, the person with the gentle tone was Madam, and Miss was the one who was hysterical. But now, it had changed. Chapter 604. With the chauffeur's cooperation, Jiang Rong couldn't clear her name even if she jumped into the Yellow River. Even if she could clear her name, Jiang Rong was no longer innocent. This kind of betrayal was like swallowing half a plate of dead flies. It was disgusting to the extreme. Jiang Rong shook her head repeatedly. Her face was pained, but she knew that if she allowed Xiao Haiqing to continue, she would end up in a pathetic state. She struggled to get up from the ground and pointed at Xiao Haiqing. "Hubby, can Haiqing's words be trusted? Don't you know what kind of person she is? All these years, how many times have we been angered by her? She doesn't study properly and only knows how to fool around with her friends. None of the people she knows are good people. I treated her with all my heart, but every time she came home, she would quarrel with me. Isn't it obvious how vicious she is? She's angry that you gave her to James. That's why she did this to me. Xiao Haiqing listened quietly and lowered her head. After a few seconds, she looked at her pitifully and said, "Auntie, I didn't know you had so much resentment in your heart. No wonder. I used to think that you were the happiest woman in the world. That's why you could tolerate other people's children hanging around in front of you. But now, it seems that you've long hated me. You always say that you treat me like your own daughter, but in reality, that's not the case, right? Auntie Jiang, I'm really disappointed. You used to be so gentle to me. Was it all fake? You're really scary now. Dad, I know I'm vicious and not a good child, but that's not an excuse for Auntie to go out and find other men. Don't you think so?" Xiao Haiqing's voice floated in the house. It was incomparably clear. Xiao Daoan was viciously provoked again. Seeing Jiang Rong rushing over like a shrew, Xiao Daoan did not even think and directly kicked her to the side. "Bitch. I want to divorce you. You like James, don't you? You can live with him from now on," he roared. Just as she finished speaking, the little boy in the house rushed out and cried while hugging Jiang Rong. He looked at Xiao Haiqing and said in a childish voice, "You stinky bastard, you're not allowed to bully my mother. You and your mother are bad people. Go die." Xiao Haiqing raised her eyebrows. "Auntie Jiang, is this how you educate your child?" Xiao Haiqing said, "I admit that I'm not a good person, but did my mother offend you?" "Father, she died suddenly for the sake of this family. When she was alive, she didn't even do anything against you. How can brother say that about her?" Xiao Daoan also felt uncomfortable. In the past, he had often compared his deceased wife to Jiang Rong, but after much consideration, he still felt that Jiang Rong was better. Jiang Rong was young, beautiful, gentle, and sensible. She even gave birth to a son for him. But now, he realized that Jiang Rong really couldn't compare to his deceased wife. Although his original wife didn't have Jiang Rong's family background, she was virtuous and didn't make him worry. She also scrupulously adhered to the ways of a woman and dressed conservatively. She wouldn't even speak to other men and stayed by his side her entire life. Unlike Jiang Rong, when she married him, she had already been with someone else. Now, she actually did something even worse. Men's possessiveness had always been terrifying. Xiao Daoan, who had cancer as a straight man, was even more so. The truth was right in front of him. He couldn't help but think a little more. He even suspected that Jiang Rong had betrayed him more than once. He suspected that this son of his. Chapter 605. Xiao Haiqing also knew that there had to be a limit to fanning the flames. Moreover, her father cared about his face, so some things only needed to be explained once, and he would investigate the rest himself. Thus, after seeing her father's dark and unreadable gaze, Xiao Haiqing went upstairs with an aggrieved expression and returned to her room. Xiao Jun was still crying non-stop, howling at the top of his lungs. In the past, he was the local tyrant of the family, and he did whatever he said. But now, Xiao Daoan was suspecting whether he was his own son, so how could he still be as distressed as before? In fact, when he saw him being so insensible and willful, he was extremely disgusted. He, Xiao Daoan, was very sensible when he was young and never caused trouble for the adults in the family. Even his daughter was the same. She was unbelievably obedient when she was young, unlike Xiao Jun. Once he was dissatisfied, he would bawl and howl. Could he really be his, Xiao Daoan's, son with such a character? Xiao Jun cried. Seeing that his father was still looking at him coldly, he became even angrier. He was just a child, so how could he know how to look at other people's faces? He only knew that his father had never been like this before. Now, he must have been deceived by Xiao Haiqing, that bastard sister, and suddenly treated him badly. Thus, he hurriedly rolled on the ground again, looking like a little rascal. The more Xiao Daoan looked, the more annoyed he became. In the end, he frowned and directly picked him up from the ground. Without another word, he threw him into the room and locked the door. Is Jun Jun my son or not? Xiao Daoan turned to stare at Jiang Rong and asked again. Jiang Rong's heart skipped a beat, not daring to believe that this was her husband's words. She was completely stupefied. "Ho hubby, what did you say?" In the past, she had once whispered to her husband that Xiao Haiqing was completely different from him. If an outsider saw it, they would think that they were not biological. But at that time, Xiao Daoan only laughed loudly and even said that other people's eyes were not good. He said that from the time his ex-wife was pregnant to the time she gave birth, she had not seen any other men except him, so it was impossible. At that time, she was still a little disappointed, feeling that she could not completely chase Xiao Haiqing out of the Xiao family. But now, she was in complete despair. From the time she was pregnant to the time she gave birth, there was no one else by her side. How could her husband say such things? Is Jun my son or not? Speak. Xiao Daoan gripped Jiang Rong's shoulder and gnashed his teeth in anger. Xiao Daoan, do you have a conscience? Of course Jun is your son. It's fine if you don't believe me, how much I've done for you all these years. Us your sons to tus to your hearts to your head. Daoan's to her. To his wife, Xiao, to herself, it's to look tus to her to herself to be it hus to be a her to she was clearly the one in the wrong. She was the one who betrayed their relationship on the second floor and went to look for James. Now, she still had the cheek to throw a tantrum at him. Two of you. Of you. Of your, ofs, you. I've really been too good to you all these years, which is why you've become so lawless. As he spoke, Xiao Daoan practically dragged her back into the house. Xiao Haiqing didn't see what they were doing, but she knew that her father's taste wasn't that strong. With such a big commotion, there was a high chance that it was domestic violence. Xiao Haiqing laid on the bed and sent a message to Jing Yunjiao, telling him about the current situation. She heard the sound of wailing, and her lips curled into a smile. Her demeanor was truly frightening. Chapter 606. Jing Yunjiao was also shocked when he received Xiao Haiqing's message. She was the one who gave him the ointment, so she could be considered as an accomplice. However, she felt that Jiang Rong deserved it. Back then, when Xiao Haiqing was still a child, Jiang Rong had already started scheming against her. This woman could be considered as the main culprit behind everything that had happened. She had even almost destroyed everything that Xiao Haiqing had. Thinking back to her past life, Jing Yunjiao was even more certain that if it wasn't for Jiang Rong, the Xiao Haiqing in her past life definitely wouldn't have become that ugly black widow. Jing Yunjiao sighed. However, just as he put down his phone, the screen lit up again and a faint ringtone sounded. It was an unfamiliar number. He picked up the call. Suddenly, a familiar voice came from the other end of the phone. She seemed to be holding back her anger as she said, Jing Yunjiao, what did you do to us? So it's Miss He. Jing Yunjiao smiled. He Jiaxi's voice was sullen and she seemed to have lost her mind. She muttered, Jing Yunjiao, don't play dumb with me, my mother and I aren't feeling well. Is it because of you? It had been a few days and she felt as if her bones were about to break. Her whole body felt very uncomfortable and her body felt stiffer by the day. Every time she turned her body, she felt as if she was moving a machine that hadn't been repaired for a long time. It was extremely uncomfortable and the only thing missing was a squeaking sound. During this period, they didn't eat anything and didn't have any medical history. It was completely the effect of Jing Yunjiao's acupuncture. They went to the hospital for a checkup but didn't find anything strange. If Western medicine didn't work, they went to a national healer. However, those old men tossed and turned for a long time and still couldn't find the cause. They only said that the qi in their body wasn't flowing smoothly. They also said something about yin deficiency or yang deficiency. They couldn't understand. When they asked if they could treat it, the other party said that they couldn't. They said that the cause was very strange and needed acupuncture. However, if there was a mistake, it could be life-threatening. She really couldn't understand. Wasn't it just a few acupuncture from Jing Yunjiao? How could it be so serious? But now she finally understood why Jing Yunjiao had said with such certainty that she would definitely come knocking on his door within a week. This bitch was threatening her and her mother's lives. Jing Yunjiao, say something. Are you proud of yourself now? You slut. Do you believe that I won't find someone to rape all of your friends? He Jiaxi roared. Jing Yunjiao snorted. Miss He, do you think you can cover the sky with one hand? If you can do it, then go ahead. But I promise you that if any danger occurs to the people around me, I will blame it all on you and make you wish you were dead. Don't doubt it. After all, haven't you already experienced that feeling? To tell you the truth, other than me, no one else can cure your illness, Jing Yunjiao said. Jing Yunjiao. He Jiaxi was so angry that her voice was undulating. After a few seconds, she said, What do you want? She didn't want to admit defeat. She had found many doctors, but none of them could help her. Right now, she felt as if her body was going to collapse at any moment. That kind of grinding pain was like a piece of rotten wood. She couldn't ignore it and was in a trance. Your attitude right now doesn't seem like you're begging me. Miss He, you dare to ask for medical treatment with such a bad temper? Jing Yunjiao mocked. The other side of the phone instantly quieted down. Say it, how much money do you want? I'll give you money, okay? Chapter 607. He Jiaxi said confidently. Now that she hadn't seen Jing Yunjiao, he was itching to scatter money on her head. Let's see if she could still be arrogant. When Jing Yunjiao heard this, the corner of her mouth hooked up and she directly hung up the phone. Money, she really didn't lack. Once the phone was hung up, He Jiaxi was immediately stunned. What did Jing Yunjiao mean by this? Did he not want money or did he want more? She clenched her teeth and quickly dialed back. Unfortunately, no one answered the phone. She was suddenly so angry that her face turned ferocious and she trembled with fear. After all, if Jing Yunjiao didn't agree to treat her, she might have to continue to suffer this torturous pain. He Jiaxi gritted her teeth until they were about to shatter. That day, she continuously called a few more times, but unfortunately, she still didn't hear Jing Yunjiao's voice. Jing Yunjiao didn't have much free time to pay attention to He Jiaxi. She was busy using this short holiday to treat patients. However, as she had more time, the number of times Old Man Shu ordered her around also increased. The medicinal herbs in Old Man Shu's courtyard were almost all concocted by her personally. She was simply treated like a high-class worker who didn't need money. At this time, the old man was sitting at the door with an exquisite small table in front of him. There was a bottle of medicinal wine and 2 wine glasses on the table. He was drinking and chatting happily with Li Xiaoyun. Jing Yunjiao curled her lips and was somewhat speechless. This old man usually paid attention to health. Every time he asked her to work, he would say a few words about how exercise was good for health. However, every time he didn't do it himself and the wine never left his side. Although the wine she brewed was different, drinking too much of it was also harmful to the body. The old man understood this in his heart, but he still didn't change. Every time Uncle Xingyuan watched from the side, his face would be full of worry. This Xu Xingyuan was Old Man Shu's disciple and could be considered half a son. She asked him before and found out that Xu Xingyuan was adopted by Old Man Shu when he was young. After so many years, he never left his side and was extremely filial. Girl, you seem to be wearing a piece of jade around your neck. Jing Yunjiao was busy when Xu Xingyuan suddenly asked. Yes, it was passed down from our ancestors, Jing Yunjiao said with a smile. The ancestor in the jade said that if she wasn't of the Jing bloodline, then she wouldn't have been able to open the space in the jade. This jade was her only connection to her biological parents. Xu Xingyuan smiled and said, I remember that a long time ago, someone came to you to ask you to be their relative. Yes, but that was an imposter, Jing Yunjiao said. She rarely talked about personal matters with Old Man Shu, mainly because she had brought up the issue of his children in the past. However, when the old man heard about it, he immediately became angry. Later on, she found out that the old man's only daughter had probably passed away, so he didn't like others mentioning it. Therefore, from then on, she rarely talked about private matters to prevent the old man from feeling sad. Xu Xingyuan was stunned for a moment before he smiled. During that period of time, Old Master was very unhappy. Later, he called young Master Li to ask about you. After knowing that you were fine, his temper became better. When he first met Jing Yunjiao, Old Man Shu asked her what her parents were called. However, at that time, Jing Yunjiao's answer was that they were orphans. After all, Yi Qin had just passed away. Because Jing Yunjiao looked similar to Old Man Shu's only daughter, and because of her pitiful background, Old Man Shu gave her special treatment. Jing Yunjiao was also clear about this point. After all, every time Old Man Shu looked at her, he had a feeling of missing someone through her face. Uncle Xingyuan, Old Man Shu only has one daughter, right? Jing Yunjiao asked. No. He only has 3 children. Old Man Shu doted on her very much. Later on, my junior sister had an accident. He was so angry that he chased his 2 sons out of the house and refused to admit that he had any sons. Chapter 608. Jing Yunjiao was stunned, and her eyes were full of surprise. She had heard of people who didn't want their daughters, but she had never heard of people who didn't care about their sons for their daughters. However, Old Man Shu was not a common man, and he didn't value boys over girls. It was no wonder that no one had come to look for him after living in Huaning County for so long. She often came to this small yard, but so far, the only stranger she had met here was Li Xiaoyun. Uncle. Your junior sister, who is also the old man's daughter, what exactly happened to her? Jing Yunjiao asked after thinking for a while. She had never been a gossipy person, but after being with Old Man Shu for so long, she knew nothing about him. Sometimes she wanted to care about him, but she didn't know how to ask. It was really awkward. Xu Xingyuan's hands paused, and a trace of memory flashed across his face. He was a little sad. Actually, we don't know either. Because the era back then was different from now, it wasn't easy to contact her. She eloped with that man. Master's eldest son acquiesced and even added fuel to the fire behind the scenes, helping the 2 of them settle down in Huaning County. However, no one knew exactly where they lived. They only wrote letters to home every week. Then, suddenly, one day, they didn't receive any letters at home. The man who was with her inexplicably returned to the capital. No matter how we asked, we couldn't get any information about junior sister's whereabouts. Master loved this daughter the most. After Xianlan disappeared, she locked herself up. Every day, she either drank or made medicine. The 2 young masters at home had no choice but to cooperate in the search. They searched for more than 10 years, but there was still no news. Perhaps Master felt that he was old and didn't have any hope, so he wanted to settle down in the place where his daughter disappeared. Maybe he would be lucky enough to meet her. After Xu Xingyuan finished speaking, he looked at Jing Yunjiao. The old man originally suspected that you might be his granddaughter, but unfortunately, the age doesn't match. When his junior sister eloped with the man named Li Tianyi, there was no news of her having a child, and Li Tianyi never mentioned it when he returned to the capital. If she was pregnant after she disappeared, then she wouldn't be as old as Jing Yunjiao. Jing Yunjiao smiled as she listened to him. I wish I could have a grandfather like Elder Shu. I like his weird temper, Jing Yunjiao said with a smile. I think you must have been sent by the heavens to comfort the old man. You can relieve the pain of missing his daughter. Ever since you appeared, the old man has been much more cheerful than before. Moreover, he also listens to you. Although the wine is good, it can be considered that there is a limit to it. It wasn't like this in the past. It was common for him to get drunk, Xu Xingyuan said again. Chapter 609. Yunjiao, I couldn't get through to your phone, so I could only come and find you. Something happened to Grandpa, someone died from his treatment. Gan Jinchen pulled Jing Yunjiao out of the door and said anxiously. Jing Yunjiao was shocked. What's going on? Although Grandpa Gan wasn't a genius doctor, he could cure most illnesses. Even if he couldn't, he could at least alleviate the other party's condition. How could he have killed someone? Actually, I'm not too sure either. It was the people in the clinic who informed me. I only know that the other party was quite old and his body wasn't very good. My grandpa had always treated him, but after my grandpa prescribed medicine this morning, His family carried him to the clinic entrance at night, saying that my grandpa had killed him. Gan Jinchen continued. When Jing Yunjiao heard this, she hurriedly turned to inform Old Man Shu. Although Old Man Shu didn't look easy to get along with, he never cared about her private matters. He only snorted and waved his hand to dismiss her. Only then did she immediately head to Grandpa Gan's clinic with Gan Jinchen. Because He Jiosai kept calling, her phone was often on silent mode, so she didn't receive any calls from Gan Jinchen. Not long after, the two arrived at the clinic. There was a commotion in front of the clinic entrance. A man and a woman in mourning clothes knelt on the ground and cried, attracting a lot of attention. Jing Yunjiao hurriedly walked over and saw an old man lying on a stretcher on the ground. His face was stiff, motionless, and not breathing. He was indeed dead. Grandpa Gan was in the clinic and obviously hadn't encountered such a situation. He frowned and checked the medical records with a serious face. Are you Gan Songbai's grandchildren? Let him out. Just as the two were about to enter the clinic, the man shouted and wailed, a quack killed someone. Not only did he cheat my old father of so much money, he even took his life. Jing Yunjiao furrowed her brows and swept her gaze over the man. The man was about 40 years old. He was crying very hard, but there was only thunder and no rain. Not a single tear could be seen. There was also a woman squatting at the side. She seemed to be truly heartbroken, and her tears flowed unceasingly. Other than that, there was also a young man who was at a loss of what to do. He was about 17 or 18 years old, and his face was filled with silence and sorrow. Jing Yunjiao opened the door and walked in. Grandpa, what medicine did you prescribe him today? It's the same as usual. That old man is getting on in years, so his body doesn't have any major problems. However, he has a lot of minor problems, so he doesn't dare to use herbs that are too strong. He only uses those that are warm and nourishing. Grandpa Gan sighed. In fact, with the old man's health, it was fine even if he didn't take any medicine. However, for people of his age, even if he was told that he wasn't sick, he might not believe it. He might even go to other places to find some random food to eat. In order to prevent such a thing from happening, he would usually prescribe some harmless or even beneficial tonics that wouldn't harm the body at all. Jing Yunjiao took the book that recorded the illness and flipped it open. Just as the old man said, the medicine was mild and beneficial. Could it be that he grabbed the wrong medicine? Jing Yunjiao asked again. Previously, when Zhongqing was helping out in the clinic, he had grabbed the wrong medicine and almost harmed old Dr. Chen who was working in another clinic. Fortunately, it was discovered in time. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Grandpa Gan shook his head again. From prescribing the medicine to grabbing the medicine, it was all done by me. I confirmed it many times, and the medicine was also brewed here. There weren't any other patients today, so I put all my attention on his medicine. There shouldn't be any mistakes. Chapter 610. Grandpa Gan let out a sigh after he finished speaking. In his entire life, he had treated and saved people. Even though he had failed to save some of them, it was not because of his mistakes. It was because the illness itself was very serious. Medical mistakes like this had only happened when he was young, and it had never led to anyone's death. The old man's expression dimmed. Jing Yunjiao thought for a moment and asked, Grandpa, how was the old man's body when he came to get the medicine? Was there anything special about him compared to usual? If one walked by the river often, the possibility of his shoes not getting wet was very small, so it was possible that it was a medical mistake. However, most of the time, the cause of a medical mistake could be found. It was impossible to kill someone for no reason. That brother. The old man thought for a moment and continued, it was about the same as usual. Because he came often, sometimes I would talk to him. However, when he was in a good mood, he would not stay for long. After all, this is a clinic. He might be afraid of being contaminated by other patients' illnesses. However, when he was in a bad mood, he would find a place to sit quietly. Today, there was no one else in the house. After I took his pulse, he asked me to do it a few more times. One moment, He said that his chest was uncomfortable, and the next moment, his legs were uncomfortable. He just refused to leave. Anyway, I had nothing to do, so I asked him if he was in a bad mood and did not want to go home. He did not tell me directly. Instead, he asked me if my children were filial. The old man sighed. In his heart, he knew that the deceased brother's children probably did not treat him well. The other party was an old man like him, but he was older. He always had a smell on him. He would come almost every 2 or 3 days, but often, he would not change his clothes for a month. The clothes he was wearing were many years old, so old that there were holes in them. If he did not sometimes hear him mention his son, he would have thought that he was a childless person. However, the old man did not lack money. Every time he came, he would pay the consultation fee. The price of the clinic was not high, and the herbs did not cost much. Sometimes, when he did not want to accept, the other party would still insist on paying, saying that money was useless to him. As Jing Yunjiao listened, she turned her head and looked through the glass door at the man who was howling in anger. Yunjiao, thank you for coming all the way here. But I don't think we can solve this problem without spending money. I'll go out and invite the young man in to discuss and see how much money is appropriate, said the old man. He got up and walked out shakily. Jing Yunjiao had his suspicions, but he didn't have any evidence after all, so he just nodded and waited to see how the other party would react. The old master went out personally. As soon as he opened the door, the other party said, "You old fart, give me back my father's life." As he spoke, he tried to rush forward. However, Jing Yunjiao stood next to the old man and grabbed his fist. "Think carefully before you make a move. My grandfather is old. If anything happens to him, you'll be committing murder." "What murder? He killed my father." The man braced himself and said after struggling for a while. Strangely, he found that his hand seemed to be completely clamped down, and he couldn't move at all. She was just a little girl, but her strength was even greater than his. He even felt that she could throw him away at any time. In front of so many people, Jing Yunjiao was not stupid enough to make a move on the man. Otherwise, public opinion would be against them. "Uncle, it's hot outside. You left the old man's body outside. Don't tell me you want him to rot sooner?" Jing Yunjiao asked again. Chapter 611. Jing Yunjiao looked sympathetically at the corpse on the ground and sighed for the old man who had passed away. He didn't enjoy the blessings of having children and grandchildren when he was alive. Now that he was dead, he had to be tormented by his son. The man lowered his head and looked at his father on the ground. A trace of guilt flashed across his eyes. "Of course, I don't want my father to suffer like this." As he spoke, he carried the old man into the clinic with his son. Jing Yunjiao went forward to help. He carefully observed the old man's body. Because it was summer, the old man didn't wear much clothing. He could see that there were some bruises on his legs. "Young man, although I don't know what happened to your father, he is still my patient. Tell me, how much money do you want?" Grandpa Gan was well aware. The old man had told him that his son didn't care about him. Now that he was dead, he came to the clinic so agitatedly. It couldn't be that he was seeking justice for the old man. It could only be for money. When the other party heard this, his face was a little embarrassed. "Old man, he died because of your treatment." "What are you talking about? Do you think I'm trying to extort you?" The man roared and then said, "But it's good that you have the heart to compensate. My father can't die in vain. Let me calculate it this way. My father has a monthly pension. It's not much, just 3,000 yuan a month. That's 36,000 yuan a year. He doesn't spend much, so he can save 30,000 yuan a year. He's 70 years old this year and his body is still in good health. He can live for another 20 years. That's 600,000 yuan. Other than that, there's also the money for his mental health and the medicine you gave him these days. Add it all up and give me 1,000,000 yuan. If you can't take it out, then don't even think about opening your lousy clinic. I'll let everyone know that you're a quack who treats people who die of diseases," the man said. 1,000,000 yuan was a lot. An ordinary family in this county only had 30 to 50,000 yuan a year. After deducting some expenses, there wasn't much left. A person with 1,000,000 yuan was considered a millionaire in the eyes of ordinary people. The Gan family did have this amount of money. Old man Gan had been a doctor his whole life. He used to work in a hospital in the county and earned quite a bit of money every month. Other than that, he also had a few clinics and pharmacies. His son was also a doctor and his daughter-in-law was a businesswoman. 1,000,000 was indeed not a lot for him. However, even though he was rich, it did not mean that his money grew on trees and he could throw it away without hesitation. He agreed to compensate not because he felt that he had really done something wrong, but because he had some friendship with his brother who had passed away. He didn't want to think about so many complicated things after his brother's death, which was why he was so straightforward. 1,000,000. Jing Yunjiao coldly snorted, "Grandpa Gan, I think it's better to call the police and let the forensic doctor investigate whether this person was killed by you. Generally speaking, if someone died, they would need to get a death appraisal report. However, the rules in this small county were not that strict. Moreover, it was such an old person. After they passed away, the relevant departments would not ask too much. They only needed the family to deal with it." As soon as Jing Yunjiao mentioned calling the police, the man's expression changed. "No. My dad is already dead. You still won't let him go? You still want the forensic doctor to investigate? When the time comes, won't they skin my dad and break his bones? Let me tell you, if you dare to touch my dad's body, I'll fight you to the death. We definitely won't agree to call the police and let the forensic doctor investigate. My grandfather definitely doesn't want to die without a complete corpse." The boy on the side also spoke up. Chapter 6:12. The atmosphere in the room instantly became tense. Everyone glared at each other, as if they were about to start a fight. "I think, Grandpa, although you can afford to pay for this, you have to see if you should. This old man who passed away looked like he had no one to take care of him. I'm afraid that his children and grandchildren are not filial at all. If this old man finds out that his children and grandchildren are using his body to cheat money, I'm afraid he won't be able to rest in peace." Jing Yunjiao interrupted the old man and spoke first. "Little girl, don't make it sound so bad. How are we cheating money? Your grandpa killed him," the man said immediately. The grandson was a little confused and did not know what was going on. Jing Yunjiao coldly snorted, "Even though we're not forensic doctors, we're still people who study medicine. How did this old man die? We can more or less see something fishy." She was not very sure at first and did not dare to jump to conclusions so as to avoid saying something wrong and causing more trouble. However, when she mentioned calling the police, the man's reaction was too much. The grandson beside him indeed had the intention of protecting the body. His face was filled with worry and sadness, but the man had a guilty expression. In fact, it was more than anger. There was also the woman who was crying beside the old man. Her hands were tightly clenched. It was obvious that she was very nervous. She subconsciously used a white cloth to cover the few bruises on the old man's body. When she was helping to move the body, she observed carefully and was almost certain that the old man had fallen before he died. There were some abrasions on his body and there seemed to be something wrong with his arm. Although it was just a fall, it was very likely to be fatal for an old man of his age. "Uncle, your father has some bruises on his body. He must have been pushed to the ground and fell, right? I saw the auntie crying while holding the old man's arm. If I'm not wrong, his arm might be broken, right?" Jing Yunjiao said. A person was dead, but the bones could not be changed. She only needed to test to know if there were any fractures or injuries. The other party was stunned and panicked. "What nonsense are you talking about? You know in your heart whether I'm talking nonsense or not. Your family came here in such a big way to hide your guilt, right? When I came in, it seemed that your neighbors were also there. They were pointing at your wife, right?" Jing Yunjiao said again. When they were outside, the people around them didn't say a word. However, after they entered the clinic, some people outside looked at the woman and seemed to have some opinions. She didn't care at first, but this woman's reaction was too strange. When a daughter-in-law cries for her father-in-law, how many of them would cry like her? She was even more concerned than her husband and sadder than her son. Her legs were even soft and she looked like she couldn't stand up. Either she was really close to her husband or she was just putting on an act. If it was the former, the old man's clothes wouldn't be so shabby and dirty. As his daughter-in-law, she should clean the old man's clothes so that he wouldn't live so sloppily. If it wasn't the former, then it must be the latter. But why did he have to put on an act? Generally speaking, no one would say anything if she behaved normally. After all, it was her father-in-law who had passed away, not her mother-in-law. After thinking about it, the only thing left was a guilty conscience. The man looked a little anxious. Damn girl, why don't you try saying another word of nonsense? Jing Yunjiao ignored his threat and looked at his son. Classmate, do you think your mother and grandfather have a good relationship? Did you follow your parents the entire time today? Didn't the two of them quarrel with the old man? Chapter 6:13. The boy was stunned. I went to a friend's house in the afternoon. However, when he came back, the neighbor told him that his mother was yelling at home and throwing a tantrum at his grandfather. When he went back, he specially told his mother not to bully his grandfather like that in the future. After all, his grandfather was getting old. At that time, his mother was very angry and did not listen to him at all. He went back to the house to take a look. At that time, his grandfather was so angry that he drank the doctor's medicine and fell asleep. A few hours later, he went to call his grandfather for dinner. In the end, he found that his grandfather's body was cold and he was not breathing at all. He was shocked and quickly called his parents. At that time, they were also shocked. When they saw the bowl of medicine on the table, they said that his grandfather was killed by the doctor in this clinic. Mom, Grandpa, did he really fall? The old man's grandson asked. The woman panicked. He just fell. After that, he got up and was fine. The boy's eyes flashed with disappointment. Mom, why didn't you tell me? She didn't tell you because she knew that the old man had a bad fall, but she was angry at that time and didn't want to care. In the end, when she wanted to see how the old man was doing, he was already dead. That's all the more reason she couldn't tell you, Jing Yunjiao said. The old man's arm was broken. At that time, he must have been very angry. It was normal for him to be shocked, angry, scared, and pushed. It was just a coincidence that the old man drank the medicine before he died, so they directly framed Grandpa Gan. Judging from the couple's reaction, they must have known the truth long ago. They were just afraid that it would be as they guessed, so they recklessly came to settle the score. They lied to their conscience and hypnotized themselves. In addition, the neighbors had heard their argument. Now that he was dead, outsiders would definitely think that they were the ones who forced the old man to his death. Gossip was a fearful thing. In order to avoid such rumors, they had to find someone to be the scapegoat. In addition, Grandpa Gan often held free medical consultations. In the eyes of some people, he was considered a rich old man in this area. If they could extort some money, it would be an unexpected gain. Mom, it can't be like that, right? The boy's face was full of disbelief. In fact, he was already suspicious and puzzled. When his grandfather died, he wanted to help, but his mother did not let him touch his grandfather's body and insisted that he was killed by the doctor. The woman's body trembled. In the next second, she raised her head fiercely. The old man was killed by your grandfather. He drank your grandfather's medicine. Really? I don't know if you have any common sense about the law. Jing Yunjiao said coldly. The police are qualified to examine the body. Do you think it's okay if you don't agree? Grandpa Gan stood behind Jing Yunjiao and couldn't help but shake his head. Let's talk about this matter openly. There's no one else here. If it's just an accident, then no one can be blamed. When this old man was alive, he thought about his son and grandson every day. It's impossible that he didn't want the two of you to be well. Grandpa Gan said. Mom, how could you do this? I thought it was really... The big boy suddenly broke down. How can you do this to Grandpa? It's fine if you don't let me visit him normally, but when I do, you let an old man suffer so much. Now that he's dead, are you satisfied?" The couple's faces contorted as they glanced at the door in a panic. "Son, don't listen to their nonsense. Your grandfather was treated to death. It's true that his arm was broken, but that was because your grandfather accidentally fell down." The man hurriedly opened his mouth and stared at the old man. "I can't win against you. You just don't want to take out 1 million, right? Since you can't explain what happened, then give us 200,000. With 200,000, we'll leave immediately." It wasn't that they had to take the money, but they wanted the neighbors to see. If they couldn't get the money, then it would prove that they were in the wrong. When the time came, they would be spat to death. Chapter 6:14. Grandpa Gan was kind-hearted and soft-hearted. He didn't want to argue with them, but when he thought of the deceased, he wanted to relent. Jing Yunjiao, however, went straight to the point. "Grandpa, it's not a matter of money. They're obviously trying to make you the scapegoat. Don't even mention 200,000 yuan, even if you gave him 100 yuan, people would still say that you're guilty. This money couldn't be given out no matter what. If it was given, it would be compensation, and compensation would mean that they had done something wrong." When Jing Yunjiao said that, the man looked at her with a ferocious expression. The people outside couldn't hear the commotion inside, so they all raised their heads to look. The woman on the ground immediately rushed out and shouted, "How can this family be so vicious? My father-in-law did fall, but he didn't die at that time. Who knows if it was this quack doctor's medicine that made him pass away? They're not willing to take any responsibility, not even $200,000. These rich people are trying to force poor people like us to death." When she said that, there was a lot of discussion. Everyone more or less had the mentality of hating the rich, so they were all pointing fingers at Jing Yunjiao. Jing Yunjiao said, "Are you trying to act shamelessly? Well then, we won't give you any leeway. We'll call the police. If it's found out that my grandfather didn't do it, don't blame us for suing you for framing him. He's a doctor. The damage to his reputation will be borne by your family. Oh right, I almost forgot. Don't underestimate the autopsy results. They might even be able to find out if he fell or was pushed by someone. If it was done by someone, even if it wasn't intentional, you'll still have to go to jail." After Jing Yunjiao said that, the woman stopped talking. Her face was full of panic, and her body was trembling. "You can't call the police. If they do an autopsy, my father-in-law will die without a complete body." Jing Yunjiao looked at her coldly and made a phone call. She originally wanted to give them a chance to bury the old man properly. She didn't want to investigate whether it was an accident or not. However, the couple insisted on slandering the old man. She couldn't stand it. Seeing that Jing Yunjiao had called the police, the family immediately wanted to leave with the body. However, Jing Yunjiao's men blocked the way. The man tried to move but was pushed away and fell to the ground in a sorry state. The big boy was dumbfounded. Seeing his parents' reaction, he already knew what was going on. "Classmate, I'm sorry. It's our fault. Please let us leave with the body. My parents won't say anything in the future. If the police come, it'll be over. If they could bring the body to be cremated before the police arrived, there would still be time." Although he had let his grandfather down, he did not want his mother to go to jail. "Yunjiao, forget it. Where it's possible to make mistakes, one should be lenient." The old man sighed behind her. It wasn't that he didn't know right from wrong, but his deceased brother definitely didn't want his son or daughter-in-law to suffer. He was already dead. Why would he want to cause trouble for his children and grandchildren? Jing Yunjiao frowned slightly. She was a little unwilling. After all, if they went back on their word and cremated the body before causing trouble, it would be difficult for them to defend themselves. "I can let them go, but you have to make them tell the truth and record it as evidence. As long as they don't cause trouble, I promise I won't leak it," Jing Yunjiao said again. When she said that, the boy breathed a sigh of relief and quickly dragged his mother over. "Mom, tell the truth. It's better to be gossiped about than to go to jail, right? The woman glared at her. After all, they were the weak. Normally, doctors would choose to keep the peace when they encountered such a situation. However, they didn't expect to kick an iron plate. This girl wasn't normal at all. Chapter 6:15. The woman stared at Jing Yunjiao, feeling extremely vexed. The man next to her was so angry that he wanted to go up and hit him, but he had already realized that Jing Yunjiao was quite strong. In addition, the police might arrive soon. By then, it would be too late for them to leave, so they could only endure it. The woman opened her mouth, wanting to say something, but she was at a loss for words. When her son saw this, his eyes turned red. "Mom, what's going on? Tell me." He had always known that his parents were not good to his grandfather. His grandfather was not good with words. In the past, he only knew that his father was neglected because of work. This caused his father to ignore him, and they had always lived separately. His grandfather lived in an old house, so there was no one to take care of him. After all, he had to go to school. If he added more time, his parents would nag, so they usually visited his grandfather once a week or two. However, because it was the holidays recently, his parents had been visiting him frequently. He originally thought that they wanted to be filial to his grandfather, but when he heard from the neighbor next door, he found out that someone wanted to buy his grandfather's old house. His parents wanted him to sell the house. "Your dad and I wanted him to agree to sell the house today, but he said that he had no place to live if he sold the house. Your dad yelled at him and left. I was annoyed, so I called him a stubborn old man. Then, I argued with your grandpa. Anyway, I don't know what happened, but your grandpa fell on the ground and lay there for a while. I was angry at that time. I thought that you were going home, so I went to cook. And I thought that your grandpa was deliberately trying to scare me. After about 10 minutes, he got up and went back to his room, so I didn't think too much about it." At this point, the woman recalled and panicked. With tears and snot, she said, "Then, I didn't expect your grandfather to be gone." There were some things that she could not say in front of her son. The reason why the old man fell was because she pushed him in a fit of anger and scolded him for not dying. However, at that time, she was just angry. She never expected that the old man would really be gone because of this fall. "Auntie, you seem to be holding back. Do you want to save it for the police?" Jing Yunjiao did not show any mercy. The woman was stunned and her body trembled. She was in despair. I was the one who pushed him. At that time, I didn't think that something would happen to him." The woman was forced into a corner and spoke in a low voice. When the old man went back to bed, her husband came back and asked about the situation. At that time, she told him the truth. At that time, her husband didn't say anything. He even scolded, "Old bastard," and didn't let her care about it at all. He wanted to leave the old man alone for a while and make him panic. Later, when they found out that he had stopped breathing, the couple knew that once others knew that the old man had passed away, someone might call the police. After all, the neighbors all knew that they had quarreled with the old man. Under pressure, he saw the bowl of medicine at the side and thought of pinning the blame on Physician Gan. They all knew about Dr. Gan. They heard that he was a very good person and often did good deeds. They thought that such an old man would definitely not have a strong temper. If he was scared by them, not only would they lose money, but they would also take the blame for them. She just didn't expect him to have such a stingy granddaughter. When she was moving the body, she actually kept glancing at the old man. At that time, she realized that there was something wrong with the old man's arm. She hurriedly tried to protect it, but it was too late. Chapter 6:16. The couple regretted what they had done. If they had known that they would be discovered by a little girl, they would have cremated the body first before coming to cause trouble. However, they were afraid that the doctor wouldn't admit it after the body was gone, so the woman couldn't stop crying, but Jing Yunjiao knew that she was crying for herself and not for the life. In their eyes, the old man was old and would pass away sooner or later, so it didn't matter when he would die. The woman didn't dare to lie anymore. After all, Time was passing by. The longer she stayed, the higher the risk of being arrested by the police. He might as well tell the whole truth in full detail. However, after she said everything, the couple's son was completely stunned. He had thought that his grandfather had accidentally fallen down, and he also thought that maybe his parents couldn't tell whether his grandfather had died from falling down or from drinking medicine, so they came to cause trouble. But he didn't expect his parents to deliberately shift the blame onto Dr. Gan. "Mom, you guys are too much." The boy immediately hugged his head and cried. Although he knew that his father didn't treat his grandfather well because of his grandfather's irresponsibility when he was young, he was already old. Even if he didn't have feelings, he shouldn't be so heartless. The parents' faces were filled with panic and fear. "Little girl, you said, you two bastards." Before Jing Yunjiao could say anything, Grandpa Gan roared angrily and stared at the man. "Every time your father talked to me, he would never say anything bad about you. He even mentioned that he might move away from here in the future. He already thought about agreeing to it. I think that if it weren't for your bad attitudes, the house would have been sold long ago." Would the old man be able to sell the house in peace if they quarreled every time they met? If the house was sold, the old man would have no place to live, so he could only live with his son and daughter-in-law. It would be fine if it was only for a day or two, but if it continued, there would be no peace in the family. The couple was thinking about money, while the old man was thinking about harmony. That was why they were holding on, but they didn't expect the result to be like this. Jing Yunjiao sighed in his heart and stopped the recording. "The two of you will also grow old one day. I hope that when the time comes, your sons will forget what you've done today." Scram. Jing Yunjiao spoke. This boy obviously couldn't understand his parents' actions. His age was still pure and beautiful, and his mind didn't have so many disgusting and dirty things. Now that he was provoked by his parents' actions, in another 10 years, he would definitely have a reaction. Once he had a disagreement with his parents, he would probably think of his parents' past. How could he not mention it? The two of them might be able to hide for now, but they wouldn't be able to hide in the future. Karma was a cycle of retribution, and it was still too early. As soon as Jing Yunjiao relented, the parents immediately reacted and hurriedly carried the body out of the clinic. When the boy saw his parents like this, the disappointment on his face deepened. The onlookers didn't understand and were about to ask when the woman said, "It's all a misunderstanding." Without further explanation, he hurriedly led his men to deal with the funeral. The old man's face was solemn. He went out and flipped the "open for business" sign over. The crowd discussed for a while, and when they saw the police come and leave, no one paid any attention to them, so they slowly left. Sigh, you reap what you sow, you reap what you sow. I've long heard that the old man didn't care about his children when he was young. Look, now that he's old, his children are taking revenge on him. Grandpa Gan's hands were still trembling as he poured himself a cup of calming tea. Even pitiful people were detestable. In another few decades, the tables would turn. Chapter 617. After Grandpa Gan sighed, he looked at Jing Yunjiao and said, "Do you know why I asked you to let them go? They don't need to be punished by the law. The rest of their lives are still long." Jing Yunjiao muttered and said. Grandpa Gan choked and shook his head. "You really have a stubborn temper. Fortunately, you are a medical student." Grandpa Gan couldn't help but roll his eyes. He knew that Jing Yunjiao had a mysterious master behind her, but he didn't know what kind of person that master was. Later on, he never heard her mention it. However, compared to that master, the one who had a greater influence on her should be the pharmaceutical master, Xu Jingji. He had met this person once at the county hospital. Jing Yunjiao's temperament was somewhat similar to Xu Jingji's. She had a cold heart, a cold personality, and would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Whoever harmed her or schemed against her, she would definitely return the favor tenfold or 100-fold. This temperament was good, but also bad. When Jing Yunjiao practiced medicine, she always remembered that people should do good deeds and accumulate virtue. Therefore, she didn't take the initiative to do bad things. If she didn't study medicine and didn't always remember medical ethics, sooner or later, she would be affected by her somewhat vicious temper. Once she reached the point where her heart was stone, how many true friends would she have by her side? Xu Jingji often guided her, but her personality was sharp. Although he could help her a lot, it only made her stronger and calmer. When water is full, it will overflow. It was better to leave a little for everything. Only then would she be like a child. Jing Yunzhao's eyes flashed with a trace of gentleness. I'm afraid that there will be fewer patients in the next few days. Is it okay? She wasn't stupid. Grandpa Gan probably already thought of her as a hedgehog. He was afraid that she would prick anyone she met. He trained himself to be like an iron wall that no one could get close to. Grandpa Gan adjusted his breathing and his complexion recovered a lot. It's good that I can rest for a few days. I haven't finished reading the handwritten book you sent a few days ago. Thinking of this, Grandpa Gan's old face finally revealed a trace of a smile. However, his old face also turned red. When he first met Jing Yunzhao, he thought that he would teach this child well in the future. After all, such talent was really rare. However, he didn't expect that Jing Yunzhao didn't need him to teach at all. Every time he saw her, she would make shocking improvements. If he didn't talk about her age, he wouldn't even doubt that she was an old doctor. Moreover, their statuses had already been reversed. Jing Yunzhao would often say that he wasn't clear about the medicinal decoctions and the principles behind them. Even though she was his junior, the one who took advantage of it was him, the old man.